I'm beginning to think that we just love being exploited by our own people rather than like having other people exploit us instead. Like, there is a difference between just a feel-good win versus like a systematic win, you know.
It brings refuge, and we ran and hide by light of the moon.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cello, aka Cello for those of you that are new. Today I actually wanted to do a little bit of a reaction video while I was like getting ready. One, because I actually have to be somewhere, but two, because I thought it was interesting and I wanted to kind of like, you know, get out all these ideas while it was fresh in my mind. So the video that I'll actually be addressing is Teanna Empowers' video on Rihanna. Let me go look at it actually. Like, it was just like recently on my... Okay, so it was Rihanna is the cash grab queen in the name of diversity. And I wanted to address it because I thought it was kind of funny. I think it was dope that she was able to muster up the courage to kind of like have that conversation. I've talked about this on my channel before about just kind of how toxic celebrity culture can be sometimes and how it makes us fear calling people out because we fear that their, you know, their stands might come out to get us and stuff. But I thought it was an important conversation to have because it addresses a lot of different things, and it also talks about just kind of anti-capitalism, which I feel like some people are more so just using as a buzzword as of late, but not really understanding what it actually means, right? So anti-capitalism, well, let me just actually look up. Okay, so capitalism is the system that we're living under now, and that is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state, right? So for those of you that have studied economics, economics is essentially like the theory that people can regulate the economy without much intervention. At least that's the hope. That's kind of like, I want to say it's like laissez-faire economics, and people have been using that in the US for a very long time, which is why we kind of control our own like industry to some extent, and without much influence or control of the government, outside of like this instance for like during the corona times when the government has to step in because it's like a national disaster. Anyways, so basically people have been calling out Rihanna. Well, actually no, I think it actually already started from when No Name addressed Beyonce, and I'll probably leave my video on like my thoughts around like Black is King and like No Name attacking Beyonce in the cards. But so basically, you know, the whole like capitalism thing and who is anti-capitalist and stuff really kind of took off during that time because of like No Name and other influencers and artists or whatever kind of talking more about capitalism. But because a lot of people have been recently awakened, they kind of use anti-capitalism and diversity and inclusion almost like synonymously, as if they're the same thing. And I just wanted to address that they are not, in fact, the same thing. And that just because you are more inclusive of Black people or more inclusive of like LGBTQIA people, that doesn't mean that you're not a capitalist. And I think that we have to understand that there's a difference between a friendly capitalist and someone who is anti-capitalist, right? Anti-capitalist is somebody that believes that this economic system does not serve us and that we need to replace it or destroy and replace to actually end up having a system that does benefit us more. Whereas a friendly capitalist, like what I would call Rihanna or Beyonce, well, Beyonce is not always friendly, but like, yes, just like people that are using this whole like, you know, we need to have more roles at the top and stuff like that. Those are kind of friendly capitalists because they're saying like, oh, the system isn't broken necessarily. It's just that we need to have more spots so that other people can access the same kind of wealth that these said people are doing, right? And in Teanna's video, she was actually talking about Rihanna using that marketing tool to kind of get more attention for her brands. So for those of you that don't follow Rihanna, she's been actually doing a lot of different business adventures. She's been doing a lot of capitalist endeavors in the last 5 years, and that's actually kind of gotten her to the billionaire status that she's at right now. So not only is she making money off of her music, she's also making money off of doing her Fenty beauty, makeup, beauty kind of like brand. She also has a Fenty Luxe brand, luxury clothing brand, and she has, what else does she has? She also just came out with Fenty Skin and Savage Fenty, which is like the lingerie brand that she has. But not least, she actually also just recently did a trademark on a homeware company of sorts, where she's going to be doing like cooking wear, and then also she was considering doing like a recipe book of sorts. Assuming that it might end up kind of being like Barbados kind of vibe style, because that's just kind of like part of her identity. Imagine it being part of her her branding as well. That's just something that's kind of like in the news, but hasn't really been confirmed by her per se on her own platforms. So I say that all to say that I do agree with Teanna Empowers' statement that that Rihanna is the cash grab queen. But I wanted to address something else that she was kind of like really focusing on in her video, which was how Rihanna has used her likeness and her and just kind of like the times to, you know, profit off of it and like continue to like make even more gains in the name of like saying she's inclusive or diverse and stuff. And I thought that was an interesting concept, because I feel like it's the same kind of, you know, it's the same criticism that people were giving Beyonce as well when she came out with her stuff, kind of saying like, well, you know, she's being like a little bit opportunistic by coming out during this time. And she hasn't really taken a strong stance or used her platform to uplift like racial injustice like throughout her career and stuff like that, right? But I wanted to talk about this because I feel like it's kind of eerie sometimes, like who is really at fault when it comes to our standards of what we're willing to accept from people. I think in our culture, or just people's understanding of capitalism is like, some people are not really anti-capitalist, but in fact they just use the term anti-capitalist, especially as of recently, to make it seem as if they are kind of like considerate of everyone and everyone's economic status, but when in reality they still have dreams and aspirations of being rich themselves, so they don't want to like full out call out capitalism, because they know that one day they're going to end up using those same get rich kind of like templates to end up making money for their own selves, right? So in the video, Teanna also talks about Rihanna's use of influencers, right? She talks about how, you know, Rihanna has used influencers for her Fenty Skin thing to kind of like show like, oh yeah, you know, these influencers are using it and they love it, so therefore like you should love it too. But yet again, that's also a marketing tactic that's already been used over and over again. But the only difference is that I'm beginning to think that we just love being exploited by our own people rather than like having other people exploit us instead. Like, I don't know. I think because, you know, when we think about individual wins of people, you know, like even for example, I think recently Tyler Perry just became a billionaire as well, and you know, we love to see that. But then when it comes to the workers that are supposedly not getting the best pay under his establishment, we are kind of mute on that sometimes. because we don't want to call out people in public, I guess. It's just this weird loyalty that we have and stuff. Yeah, so in that sense, I think that it's good that we call out people like Rihanna or a Beyonce or whatever the case is. Like, I don't really think that any one person in particular is to blame. I think it's really the system, but they're just used as an example. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of get at the fact that I think the real issue is that people don't understand what anti-capitalism actually means. I think sometimes people use, or maybe they do understand it, but they just typically like end up using the term when in actuality they're not ready to make that commitment to say the system that we live under altogether, and we want to, like, you know, create and start anew and stuff like that. That's one thing that I wanted to address. I also wanted to talk about how we as Black people, we don't hold our own accountable because we are still kind of under the false pretense that like representation really means something, that, you know, and sometimes it does. Maybe it opens up doors for a few others to end up actually being able to also get a job in, you know, in a higher level company, for example. But ultimately, that doesn't help us, like the masses. It doesn't really help anybody that was already like struggling, like for real to begin with. I think it really just helps the people that were kind of already well off. Like, I mean, take for me, for example, like I can admit that like throughout my life, I don't come from like the best like past in terms of like my financial, but because I'm college educated and, you know, I fit within a certain frame of like respectability politics that, like, you know, in terms of how articulate I speak and stuff like that, that I can secure myself within a middle class or higher class if that was what I, you know, wanted to do, right? But that's just, that doesn't mean that I'm just gonna go ahead and stop thinking about what other people that are, you know, not in my position are going to be experiencing. And I think that's what sometimes people do. Another component of the equation that I feel like we tend to fall off on is just the impact of influencer culture and how well, I can't even call myself an influencer, but how like some influencers, for example, especially folks that get brand deals and are, you know, they use their platforms to advertise other people's companies. It's within their self-interest to maintain certain relationships with people. So they're probably not going to call out a Rihanna, for example, right? Because, I mean, let's be real, at this point, everybody and their mama is like, has a Savage Fenty, like, brand deal, and from what it seems like, it does seem like she's paying her people well. So, and that goes back to my whole like idea around like Rihanna being a friendly capitalist, so people not really wanting to, you know, upset her or call her out because they feel like, well, I mean, she is giving, you know, Black people jobs, so that's kind of like, well, why else will we like call her out essentially? Like, she's doing what she can. She also ended up like in her little speech, she said, "Tell your friends to pull up," which I still actually use as a gif sometimes, or as like a phrase in general. But I think the reality is like Rihanna is like somebody who, you know, has reached like a certain level of success, and while it's dope that she continues to use her platform to like, you know, bring up certain issues and stuff, the truth is that she can tap in and tap out. She's not really living the level of exploitation that the people that are out in these streets are really doing, you know? Like, yes, maybe she can kind of like come to a protest, but when it comes down to it, her loyalty will still be towards like the capitalist people or like the capitalist establishments that are like feeding her career essentially. So there's that. I think sometimes we have such high expectations for our faves, because we think that just because they're nice people or they're good people that they're gonna end up kind of saying things the way we say things completely. But I mean, the reality is that, yeah, when you start making more money, you're not gonna have the same struggles as other people. There's also a difference of like surviving capitalism versus like being a capitalist yourself. And I haven't really seen a blueprint on like what that threshold is, right? But my imagination is that the threshold would probably be somebody who is surviving capitalism is more so like if you are, you know, just going to work and trying to make a living, and let's say, for example, you are trying to make up to like 6 figures or something like that, just to kind of like support your family, to live somewhat comfortably, or not comfortably, but just more so like, you know, like without fearing that you're not gonna that you'll be without the next day, essentially. But once people get to making like, let's say, I don't know, over $300,000 or whatever, then that's when they have made a conscious decision that capitalism has works for them, or not even just that, like they're just, you know, they're constantly seeking out endeavors of how they can continue to make more and more money. So that's the reason why people, you know, open up different like businesses or have merch, or really trying to make more money in general, like on a daily basis, like trying to figure out like what to do. And I think that that's the reason why like the whole representation thing is really contradictory, because it's not like F the system, it's like trade. It's almost kind of like, oh yeah, like let me trade out this boss for a black boss so I can feel like they care about me more. I don't know. There is a difference between just a feel-good win versus like a systematic win, you know. And I feel like all the like representation or diversity and inclusion and stuff like that, even the recent campaign that Jackie Aina like helped like promote, which was Pull Up or Shut Up, when beauty brands were called out for, well, like beauty brands companies were called out to actually expose their demographics of like who they hire, and also promoting them to kind of like to some extent incorporate like affirmative action to increase the percentage of people of color that they have within their staff. But yeah, like I said, that's like a feel-good like win. That's not like a systematic win. Another good example is how when Lancome, for example, like first came out with their like diverse shade of makeup and foundation or whatever. While that can help me as a South Sudanese dark-skinned person, it's still not really addressing like the day-to-day like struggles that like other people that are not in my position have to struggle with, because it's more so just like it's taking me into consideration as a consumer, but it's not taking into consideration the people that can't even afford to be such consumers. If you get what I'm saying. My point is just to say that like when we think about these different kind of reforms, while it's definitely helpful to our community, we can't necessarily just, you know, flat out consider that to be like anti-capitalist, because it's not going against the system. It's more so working within the structures and the limitations that the system has provided for us, and just more so like kind of like bending the rules or pushing the envelope to some extent to try to call for their commitment to some things. And I just wanted to kind of like talk about that, because I feel like sometimes with representation, even when it comes to our most like recent election, we as Black people have such minimal standards of like what we want. And while obviously in the beauty space and in the workspace we can call for these small reforms and stuff like that, in the sphere of like when we're talking about like government demands and stuff like that, that shouldn't be like our cap, essentially. Like like having Kamala Harris as a vice president, for example, just because she represents us as people shouldn't be our cap. Like we should also make sure that not only is she a black person, but that said black person also has certain like attributes of a person that will bring the kinds of like change that people want to see. You get what I mean? Like I guess like we just need to keep the same energy when it is like a black person, you know, or when it is a black company, or when it is a black representative, a black cop, etc., etc. Like we just need to keep the same energy, and we need to stop falling under the facade that just because we have representation that things are gonna like drastically change. Because even if I have if you switch out my white boss for a black boss, that doesn't mean that things are gonna change completely. Yes, it might mean that somebody's gonna be a little bit more considerate to me and my blackness or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna always be understanding of what you're going through, your personal struggles. Because at the same time, like at the end of the day, they're still like your boss. They still have to make sure that you like meet like certain outcome measures and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of like what I got from the video with Teanna, whatever. Like I said, it's an interesting conversation, and I feel like we definitely need to have more of them. So yeah, anyways, let me know what you guys think down below. I am just gonna finish my face off camera most likely, and maybe, I don't know, put a little like clip at the end or whatever like that of how I end up looking, whatever. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this conversation, what your thoughts were on some of these different campaigns, and then also, do you really think that we should continue holding people accountable in the manner that we have been with like call out culture and stuff like that, or do you think that we should like take a different approach? Anyways, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, like this video if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.
So I want to say thank you to my mom. She tell my smoke. How low, wherever you say I will go.